Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let's build a guessing game using Python. Now, in the previous video, we learned how to use conditions, functions, loops, and then the print function also. So now in this video, we're going to be using those concepts to make a real life project. Now, if you missed the video, I'll be sharing the link in the description, and also the link should be showing in the top right corner of your screen right now, so you can click and go ahead and watch that video, understand the concept, and then come back to building the guessing game. Now in this guessing game, we'll be giving the user a chance to provide inputs. So now let's learn how to provide inputs first. So let's learn how to get the user to type in something in their terminal, and then we'll receive it in our code. So just before we go on, let's learn how to do that. Now let's go ahead and say, let's create a variable. Now let's say value equals inputs. Now, if this goes right, we should be having the user inputs stored in this variable. So let's go ahead and add something like this and then print value. Now, this input is a built-in function in Python that enables the Python to get inputs from your command line interface. So let's go ahead and run this code and see what happens. So let's say Python 3 guess.py. Type in anything. So now you can see it's like telling me what to do. So type in anything. That's the text that we provided inside of our code. So let me type in my name, for example. Now you can see our name was stored in the value, variable value, and then it was printed. So that works fine. Now we've learned how to get user inputs. But now how do we get our guessing game to work? So first, let's create a function that gets a value from the user. But we don't just want any value, right? For the user to be able to guess our number, we need the user to tell us the number that they guessed, right? But now we need the user to always provide an integer as the value, right? So let's go ahead and create a function to achieve that. Let's say def get user inputs. Now, once again, this get user input is the name of our function. Now, we would not be using any arguments, so let's go ahead and just close it like this. Now, we have what is called an infinite loop in Python. So an infinite loop is a loop that continues forever until you decide that it stops. So now this is the way to create an infinite loop. You say while true, and then you do this. Now this loop is an infinite loop. It only stops when you call the break function, the break keyword. So let's say print, print hello. Right, so this should continue printing hello until I stop it in my terminal. So let's see if this actually works. So let me go ahead and call my function. So let me say get user input. So let me run my code, Python guess.py. So you can see it continues to print hello until I choose to stop it using the Ctrl+C command. Now let's go ahead and get user input using this. Now we've learned how to get the user input, right? Using the inputs function. Now let's go ahead and say user imp equals inputs. Guess. Now we need to check to see if this number is an integer, right? So now instead of just trying to check and using multiple if conditions, there's what is called the try and except in Python. So try and except enables you to try something, then see if it does not work. If it does not work, then you go ahead and do something else. So now let's use the try. Now this int, right, is a function in Python. You know, I said it's a data type, right? Yes, it's a data type. But now this int in this case is a function that converts a string to an integer. But guess how? This only works if your string is actually a number. Now let's see how this works. Int and then user imp, then except we want to pass. Now this pass means I don't want to do anything, just continue, right? Well, now let's go ahead and see what happens. Well, instead of pass, let's print that is not a number, right? And let's go ahead and say, now if we successfully convert the user inputs into an integer, right, that means we've gotten the right number, we've gotten the number as input. So now we want to continue. So now to stop an infinite loop in your code, what you do is run the break keyword. Now this break stops the infinite loop. It breaks out of the infinite loop, so to say. So let's go ahead and say return. So now what this does, let me re-explain this function. This is a while true function, which means this is an infinite loop. So we want to continue to do this until the user provides the correct input, which is a number. Now what we do here is ask the user for input. Whatever it is, just ask the user for input. Now here we try to convert the user's input into a number and then return it into our code. But really, okay, we will not be really needing this. Let me change the return. So now there are two ways to do this. We could just use user_inf here and then return. Now this is one way to go about it. Here we created a variable, right, and stored the user input. Now here, you know, we said we tried to change the user's input to a number. Now the reason why that is when you use the input function in Python, it gets the inputs in string format. And now we cannot check a string format if it's an integer. We cannot try to make it work into an integer without converting it first. So now when we get the input, it's a string, right? And then we try to convert it back to a number. Then if that doesn't work, it means the user provided a text as input for us. And then we want to tell the user that, okay, this is not a number. Then we go ahead and decide to change it and then return it to the user in this line. Now this will work fine. Let's test it and see how it works. Python gets.py. Let me provide a string. You can see that's not a number. Let's say h. That's not a number. But when I provide a number like 9, it works fine. It breaks out of the infinite loop and then it works fine. But then there's one more way to do this. Instead of trying to break and then return, you can just use the return function right here. You can do this, remove the break, you can just return right here. Return. So now this would also work exactly the same way. I provide text, it doesn't work. A single character, it doesn't work. But then when I provide a number, then it works fine. So now we've designed our get input function to get only a number input, not a text input. So now that works fine. Let's go ahead and write another function to solve another problem for us. Now we need to be able to generate a random number, right? So let's go ahead and see how that works. Now there is a module in Python. For now, you don't really need to care about what this is. We'll be discussing modules in full in some other videos, the next videos. So let me import a module that we want to use to get our random integer. So now from random, imports randint. So now let's write a function to generate a random number for us. Now we'll be taking no arguments, so we don't need to provide anything in the parentheses. So now what we'll do here is just return random. Now we want to generate a random number, right, between 1 and 20. So now we'll be saying 1 and 20 here. Now you don't need to worry about this randint or random in this case. I'll be explaining modules very detailed in the next video, so don't worry about this right now. What you need to worry about is the functions and all. So now let's go ahead and let's see if this works actually. Let me call the generate random number function. So now print generates random number. So now this should generate a random number for us whenever I run this code. So let me go ahead and clear my terminal, run this. Let me guess. But now you can see it's saying function, but we don't want that. So let's say that's because I didn't put the parentheses here. But now that should work fine when I run it again. Now you see we have 1 as a random number that we generated. When I run again, we have 11 as a random number that we generated. When I run again, we have 15. When I run again, we have 8. You can see these numbers fall into the range of 1 and 20 at all times because that is the way we defined it. 1, we get 2. So no matter what, it falls into the range of 1 and 20. So now we've gotten two functions working. We've gotten our get user input and then generate random number function. So now let's see how we can make our guessing game using these two functions. So now before we go ahead, let's create a variable that would store our random number, right? So we can compare it to the user input. So let's go ahead and say random number equals generate random number. So now this variable would store our random number. Whenever it's generated, to just store it. So now let's go ahead and see what we can do. Let's create a variable, right? Value or user value. Now this variable should store the user's inputs. Like after we've gotten the number that the user guessed, we should store it here. But now let's just use -1 because we need to store something inside for now. Now we want to enable the user to guess the number, like a single number, like 5 times before the game stops. Like after 5 tries, we want to stop the user from providing any more inputs. So let's go ahead and say for I in range 5. So now this loop will continue 5 times, right? So now let's go ahead and say user value equals get user inputs, right? So we are going to store the new value for the user value is going to be the inputs that the user provides. That's the number that is guessed by the user. So now if the number is correct, that's if user value equals the random number. Now you can see we are using the if condition to check those two numbers if they match. Like if the number the user provides, that's the number that the user guessed, is the same thing as the random number, then we want to break out of this function, right? But now let's check if here again. Then we're checking the same condition here again, so we can do something that is actually quite fun. So let's go ahead and do this. Now we want to print correct, right? So now if this works, that means the user is correct. Let's go ahead and see how this works. So let me run my code. Here I have 8. Now you can see it's not doing anything. That means I didn't get the number right. Let's say 9. I didn't get it right. Let's say 10. I didn't get it right. Let's say 15. Still didn't get it right. 18. Now you can see it stopped because I didn't get the number right and it's 5 times already. Well, let's try again and see if I can actually make it work. Let's say 10, 15, 18, or 20, or let's say 7. Well, I still didn't get it right. But now we need to find a way to let the user know if the user has gotten higher than the number required, or if the user is lower than the number required. So you can give the user like hints towards getting the number right. So let's go ahead and do something about that. Now, if the user is getting the number right, we want to break out, right? But then if the number is wrong, we want to use the else. That means the user did not get the number right in this try. But now, how do we tell the user that, okay, the number you provided is much higher than the number that is generated, right? So you can try to go a little bit lower to get towards the number, or you need to get higher to get towards the number. So let's go ahead and get the user hints. So now we want to use an if condition to check if the number is lower. Now let's say if user value is less than random number, then we want to tell the user that you need to go higher, right? So let's print higher. Now else, if the number that user provides is like greater than, then we want to use else. Tell the user to go lower, right? Print lower. Now let's go ahead and try again. Let me guess 10. Now you can see I need to go higher because 10 is less than the number that was generated. Let me now say I want to use 15. Now you can see I need to go lower. I actually didn't spell that well, but now you can see I need to go lower, right? Let's try 12. I need to go lower again. Let's try 11. Now you can see it's correct. So let's go ahead and change this to lower. So now you can see it's actually beginning to make sense. Let me try again. Guess, let me guess 12. Now you can see I need to go higher. Let's try 16. I need to go higher again. Let's try 18. I need to go higher. Let's try 19. Correct. So now it's giving hints. So you need to learn how to, like, you need to understand that you need to go higher with your numbers, or you need to guess lower. So now let's try one more time before we close the video. Let's say 10. Actually, I'm correct on the first try. That's very nice. So let's try again. We have 10 lower. So I need to go like somewhere like 5, and it's actually correct. So that's all about the guessing game. I'll be uploading this video to my GitHub repository, so you can check that out. I'll be leaving the link in the description or the pinned comment, so you can check the link to get the source code. Thank you so much for watching. Please like my video and subscribe to my channel. And also, if you could, share with your friends and let them learn also. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye, everyone.